They say all good things must come to an end. And as we close out this year, 2024, we've had some great takeaways and some really good lessons learned that we're going to be sharing with you guys and recapping. So make sure you stick around and join us for this episode.
Enjoy the episode.
Enjoy it more. If you're an investor or want to be an investor and you're looking to create passive income that exceeds your monthly expenses, then this is the podcast for you. Here on the Infinite Wealth Podcast, we combine the philosophies of Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad, along with Nelson Nash's infinite banking concept. Welcome to the Infinite Wealth Podcast. I'm Cameron Christensen, along with our co-host Anthony Faso. And as we said in the introduction, guys, we are wrapping up the year 2024. And Anthony, you may know this, but I doubt it. We are approaching 300 episodes. Mm-hmm. We are really close, right? At the beginning of next year is when we'll hit that mark. But this time, as we close out this year, we're looking back at the episodes that we've done this year, and we've got some lessons and some good takeaways that we want to touch on and kind of revisit and bring it back to the forefront for you guys.
Perfect. And one thing that we like to do, or at least I like to do it, where we each come up with our highlights and then share it. I will say some of my highlights are about from podcast episodes, and some are about life or just other sources of knowledge in addition to our podcast.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Other sources of knowledge.
Took it up a notch.
Maybe. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Mm-hmm. This is why you like it, because you come in as a competition, set your own rules, and then bang, make it in there at the end. All right, Anthony, I know you've got a long list of lessons learned. You learned a lot this year, just like every other year. I'll let you start, man. I got about 4 things on my list.
Which means I have 5.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to summarize this lesson learned, Cameron, with something you may have that you may have heard of. Oh God, give me the serenity to accept the things that cannot be changed, the courage to change what can be changed, and the knowledge to know the difference. Now, this kind of summarized a couple things that happened for me this last year. Normally, I take pride in I'm not really a worrier. A lot of things happen. I kind of really focus more on the long term. But this year, there was 2 items that I really did worry about.
Ooh, I think I know one. I don't know the other.
What do you think the one is? You going to make a joke?
No, I think. Well, one was recent. One was the election. I don't know what the other one would be.
Yeah. One was the election, and I tell you one thing that had happened. I talked with a friend of mine who we have different perspectives, which I like talking to him because I like to kind of hear the way that he thinks. Because I think it's interesting that one thing can happen and then people have a totally 2 different perceptions.
Yeah.
And one time we got really deep into it and we got in this text thread, and honestly, it stressed me out. And what had happened, well, he's also an author. I mean, so he can write. I think it's very clear. I can't write. Like that's not my gift.
Just imagine this text thread. He's writing passages and you're writing yes, no.
Mine very. But you know what? Like blah blah blah, and he's like, oh, well, what about this? And I'm like, oh, well, what about that? And you know what had happened every time I picked up the phone, like my blood started pumping. I got stressed, and honestly, a little. I wouldn't say anger, but I was like amped up, you know, and we kept on going back and forth. And then finally I went out on a date with my wife. I was still pumped up and I couldn't focus on our date night. And I'm like, this really made no sense. That was really eye-opening to me. I really hadn't gone into a contentious discussion. And then I started following a friend of ours, Sam Prim, who's been on the podcast, and he had a good piece of content saying, hey, if Harris wins, my business is going to be successful. If Trump wins, my business is going to be successful, because it's all about what I'm doing, not about what's happening on the outside. And it really put me into perspective how much pressure or emphasis we're putting on things that we cannot control. And even things that happen, whatever happens in the White House, I think makes a little impact. Like when it comes down to what we're doing, because we're going to pivot. You know, we had success when Trump was president. We had success when Biden was president. So that really kind of helped me to really not stop focusing on things that I cannot change. And then the second piece of that came to artificial intelligence.
Okay.
Like beginning of the year, I was generally worried about what was going to happen. And then again, I kind of realized, well, I can't control it, but there are certain assets and advantages of using AI, and that if I don't use it because I take some moral high ground, but my competitor does, I'm going to be left off. So it really kind of, I guess maybe the way is if you can't beat them, join them. So I kind of started to be more open. Thoughts or comments, Cam, or do you have words of wisdom?
Yeah, I would agree with you. There's a lot of things that happen that we cannot control, and I think that was a great example of a lot of headspace that people devoted towards the buildup of this election.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a good conversation with a client that saw things differently than I did, and we had a good conversation. We kind of both shared our perspective, our sides on it, and mutually agreed to disagree, and I think we're both open to hearing from the other sides, and so it started a conversation, and so I see that as a positive for both of us.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cam, what was something that you learned over this past year?
I've got a few things written down, and really as I approached kind of this podcast, the first thing that came to my mind was I started to think back about some of the podcasts that were most talked about or that were discussed with me from clients. So we do a podcast, clients call in, we have conversations about it, whatever it is. And so one of those goes right along with what you're talking about with it, which is a change of perspective. We interviewed Michael Zuber earlier this year from One Rental at a Time.
I got him on my list here too.
Oh, yeah. And that's exactly how I would categorize that conversation or interview that we had with him, was a change of perspective. At least for me, one of the big takeaways that I had from that was that a lot of times in this entrepreneur space, a W-2 or a job is often vilified, and it doesn't have to be. He came on our podcast, and what he talked about is how banks love to lend on W-2 income. And so he talks about how to utilize that W-2 income to maximize your real estate investing. And I thought it was a great change of perspective, a great message. And then also what he has, he follows it up with, man, you don't have to be the guy out there that's buying 10 properties in a year, right? If you can get one at a time and you look up in 5-10 years, you're going to be in great shape. And so I really appreciated that podcast and his message. Anthony, what about you?
I would say another lesson that I learned here, or I would say I think all of these were things that I may had already known, but sometimes I needed a little slap on the face to kind of to remember, and that there's multiple ways to make money. I went back and looked at some of our podcasts. We had an episode on turnkey rental properties where you really don't have to do anything. I mean, you're outsourcing the property management, they're finding it and the repairs. Simple way to get that first initial step in real estate. We also interviewed about building a brand on Amazon. And I know oftentimes the biggest obstacle people think they have is the lack of capital.
Yeah.
But we had not one, not two, but 3 different podcasts this year talking about ways that you can buy and or control real estate without using your own money. And it was just some ways of creative financing. And those are going to take a little effort, but the rewards can be extremely fruitful. And the point I want to make is that if you have time, but you have a little bit of money, start looking at some of these episodes. We're going to have them listed in the show notes, but start a business, right? And if you have a good idea or a good process, money will find you, right? Because on the flip side, there's a lot of people that have money, but they have such little time. And so for something like that, we have some podcast that maybe turnkey real estate is perfect for you. And then we also had interviewed a guy who they go around and it's a syndication where they buy parking lots and mobile home parks. Again, that is very passive. So I think the point is there's a lot of opportunity out there, whether you have the time or the money. The next thing you need to do is to take action.
Nice. Great point. My second point that I had here, again, kind of falls in line with what you're talking about. But again, this topic was probably the second most discussed interview that we had, at least from my point of view. And that was our interview with Scott Jelinek.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, with the art of the slow flip. And so he has a strategy that he shared with us where there's a market out there where banks are not servicing individuals that want to buy properties at a certain dollar amount. Mm-hmm. And so there's absolutely an opportunity for investors to come in and essentially take the place of the bank and offer that financing to them. And so he walks you through that whole process. And again, it's an opportunity where you don't need a lot of money, right? Is you can come in and you can acquire properties for less than $100,000 with very little out of pocket. And then you're essentially becoming the bank, you're financing it over the next 30 years. And so that was a great interview. Not only did we get a response from what I would say is our clients, we got a good response from his clients. So he's got kind of a group that he talks to and works with. And there was a pretty good outpouring of people that were reaching out to us to discuss how to partner up infinite banking concept with the art of the slow flip. And so, again, as I look back at the end of the year, great opportunity for the both of us.
And you know what was also great about that episode is we had a few clients that were already incorporating the art of the slow flip. So it's good. And those people are also in our community. So you can ask them questions, which I'm going to allude back to that here in a little bit later.
All right, Anthony, what's your third point here? What do you got?
The third lesson that I learned is success requires action. Success doesn't happen to you. You must make success happen. If you're just sitting at the sidelines, listening to the podcast, maybe taking notes, and you never take action, then you're never going to achieve the goals that you are capable of achieving. And one example that comes to mind, and maybe I'm a little biased because this is my son, but he was looking forward that when he wanted to send his kids to a certain private preschool. Now, I don't remember the exact dollar amounts, but he was like, how am I going, but the budget's tight. How am I going to make room or margin to be able to pay to send my kid to school that he wanted to? So a year before they started school, he started finding out, how can I make $1,000 a month to pay for the school? And so he went and took action, started a vending machine business, and now is making about 3 times as much as he needed to. And this has turned into a nice sized business. But if he wouldn't have taken action as school approaches, he would have created all of that stress, maybe potentially gotten into debt, or maybe didn't send his kid to the school that he wanted to. And the same thing goes for this is just his school, but let's put yourself in what you plan to do for what you want to do in retirement. We need to start taking action and planning now. And because success compounds, because once you learn the skill each year, you're going to get better and better at that skill. Or even if we take it to starting an Amazon business, where that kind of plan is typically after year 3 or 4 that you look at, evaluate selling the business. And so thus, if you were to wait 3 years, you're just now starting. But if you were to start in the present day, by that 3rd year comes around, not only do you have that knowledge, but you have a business that you're potentially selling, and you can take that capital and that knowledge to flip it and do it again. So just like we talk a lot about the compound interest curve, but there's also the success compound curve as well. So the sooner you start, the sooner you're going to be able to achieve your goals.
Well said. Well said.
Oh, I forgot one other thing.
Well,
on that, taking action, what's stopping you? So if whatever you're on the fence there waiting, whether it's to get into real estate or the slow flip or Amazon, or maybe you're just still on the fence about infinite banking, start taking action, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to achieve your goals.
Okay. Well said. Before I share my third point, speaking of action, if you guys are out there listening to this podcast and maybe you've been listening for a while and you're like, man, you know what? I think this might be a good fit for me. Guys, feel free to schedule a meeting down below in the show notes, and you'll get on a call with Anthony and myself, and we're happy to go through your situation with you and see if infinite banking is a good fit, and maybe even discuss some of these opportunities that we've discussed over this last year. So moving on. Number 3. These next 2 items that I wanted to share with you guys were kind of my favorite 2, looking back over this year. If you've been a listener of the podcast, you may have a guess as to what one of these 2 would be. But one of my favorite guests this last year was actually Ken Gronbeck. He's the demographer, and his tagline is, he doesn't count money, he counts people, or something like that. Right. And so he's a demographer. And so he's looking at generations, the sizes, the population of generations. A generation is typically about 20 years. And so he looks at kind of the size of the generations and then what that does to the economy and what type of demands it will place on an economy. And so from that, right, he's making projections on what is going to happen in certain areas that are of interest to investors. So really good interview that we had. We've had him on a couple times, and one of the takeaways that I had was this: is that he had talked about the size of 2 generations specifically. He talked about Gen Y and he talked about Gen Z. So everyone knows that baby boomers was going to be one of the biggest generations that we've had, and that generation had about 74 million people that were born in a span of about 20 years, 1946 to 1964. The message that he was sharing with us is that we've got 2 generations, Gen Y and Gen Z, that are actually bigger than the single greatest generation prior. And so Gen Z, which was 1996 to the present, has 86 million individuals born in that age range. And Gen Y has, which is 1977 to 1995, has 83 million people that were born in that generation. So we've got 2 ginormous generations back to back that are coming kind of through the economy. And one of the things that he shared with us is the pressure that's going to be put on housing. And so one of the highlights that he talked about was the opportunity that is going to be found in multifamily, not only today, but also for the next 10 years. And so if you guys did not listen to that podcast, highly recommend you go back and give it a listen. There's some great insights in there.
Good one.
Yeah.
Good one.
Vassal, what do you got?
Okay. The next lesson that I learned in 2024 is the importance of community. You had mentioned the interview that we had with Michael Zubler, and he had a great story. Well, it kind of turned out bad, but his first rental property did not turn out well. And if he wasn't in a community or around other like-minded people, most people would have told him, you never should have got into real estate anyways. You don't know what you're doing. Go max out your 401k. But he was in a safe place where, like, okay, well, what did you learn from it? How can you do it better on the next one? So let's try it again. And so he would have been stuck probably in a cubicle, or maybe by now he'd probably have a nice office, but as an accountant crunching numbers, right? And now he has a successful podcast, and now he's living his financial freedom dream. But that is in part because he surrounded himself with like-minded people. With a lot of the topics we have here, whether it's creating passive income or infinite banking, most of your friends or people in your inner circle probably are not aware of it and might be telling you to do the same. Oh, you shouldn't do that. Just do this and do what everybody else is doing. So you want to be successful. You need to hang around successful people, being in a community. on that note, we have started, I'm going to call this phase 1 of our community, where we do have a private Facebook group. I say phase 1 because this is the first time we're announcing it, but next year we're really going to step up the game with the community, with a lot more resources on there. So if you want to get in a community about infinite banking that also talks about passive income, check out our private Facebook group. Currently, you do not need to be a client. You just need to be open-minded and being able to share your ideas. But the bottom line is, it's so important to be around like-minded people.
Nice. Great point, Basso.
Cameron, what's your next point?
Yeah.
Oh, you don't have one.
Oh, I do have one.
You do? You just made it up.
No, I don't. This is my fourth one. So
it is your fourth?
Yeah,
okay.
As I'm looking back over the year, again, man, one that jumped out to me, I was super excited to get this guy on as a guest. We had Robert Kiyosaki's accountant. We had Mr. Tom Wheelwright as a guest on the show. And there was a ton of lessons that you could take away from that 60-minute interview. Really what he came in, and as I was looking at my notes, he was dispelling a lot of the myths that are out there. And the one that I made note of was how the wealthy are taking advantage of the tax code, and why can't you? And so if you guys are out there and taxes are a pain in any way for you, which is probably everybody, is you guys need to take some action, like Anthony talked about before, and find some resources that speak to you. And I'm going to highlight some of his stuff. He's written several books that is a great read for somebody. And what you guys, the lesson that I've taken away from his books is that you need to start with the end in mind, which is almost counter to what everybody else is doing in the financial space. Is nobody starts with, hey, what's our end goal? Where are we trying to go? Everybody is typically looking at now today, and their main strategy in the tax realm is deferral. And so do your guys yourself a favor, go look up Tom Wheelwright, follow, subscribe, and then also read a couple of his books. And that'll be a great start to 2025 for you.
Well done.
Thanks. Basso, what do you got?
Another lesson that I learned is the importance of teaching your kids about their credit score earlier than later. We did a podcast on this when my daughter, now she's graduated from college, has started her career, wanting to start buying some assets and a home. We're like, well, we need to look at your credit. Pulled up her credit, and her credit, I think, was as high as mine. And I got good credit. All right, let's just make sure. I mean, it's not that mine is terrible, so is hers. Wow. But we started looking deeper, and she had a credit history going back 15 years. And she's 25 years old. I mean, so that's kind of saying that she had a credit when she was 10. In a way she did, because we had, unbeknownst to us, this gave her credit when we put her on one of our business credit cards. The goal was for her to have that for emergencies only, the ability for that credit card. But by putting her on there, she got credit. That was part of her credit history. So she has credit. And one of the things that they look at is not just paying on time, but the length of time that you have credit cards open. So that was helpful. And so we did require her to get a student loan. And that's something I require parents to do for a couple of reasons. For one, I think it's important for kids to have some skin in the game. Hey, if you're not successful here, then I'm not paying the loan. Yeah. But if you will, then I will. But not only did she has some skin in the game, but I didn't even realize that also counted for credit for her. So even if you don't need the money, I would take it so they have some skin in the game. Maybe you just throw the money in a policy, and then you could pay it off when they graduate. But a lot of times we talk about teaching our kids about money, about infinite banking, about real estate. We also need to make sure that we teach them the importance of their credit score. So I would go back, if you're interested, and take a look at episode 232 about teaching the kids about their credit score.
Nice. Good point.
Cam, what's your fifth item?
My fifth item, I've got it right here.
Okay.
It's called honorable mentions.
Oh, good segue.
You
Yes,
like that, huh?
I have some too.
Yeah, awesome, guys. Hey, also, as I look back over the course of this year, we were actually pretty intentional this year when we were creating content for you guys. Is that it wasn't just Anthony and myself up here telling you guys about how great infinite banking was. Is we had reached out to some clients that have found success using this strategy, and so we wanted to highlight kind of their story and then have them tell you guys kind of their process and their experience with infinite banking. And so, and we had some really good interviews with some of our clients. Matt and Nicole Ridenauer, which were on just recently, some real estate investors up in Michigan. Jason Jasper, the way that he's taken infinite banking and kind of taught his kids some sound money principles using the policies has been great. It's been awesome to watch. And then we had Derek Fontenot that was on here, and man, this guy has just taken off as far as some of the land investing that he's been able to do. And so it's been great to watch that. And then we also had the Hewans on, and I think they made fun of me the most as far
They did. They were the ones that nailed the designer hoodie that you were wearing.
Yeah, so that one was good as far as them making fun of me. But so it was a good one.
Well, let's start. We also had Sean Dempsey on there as well.
Sean was on, yep.
Which he actually wrote a book about infinite banking, which is very good. So we will be having him back on to discuss his book. Was there any more honorable mentions?
No, that was it. It was just great to where I was highlighting the fact that we'd brought some clients on so that you guys could hear their story. We'll put those episodes in the show notes as well.
Okay. I have some honorable mentions as well. Some things that I learned this year, some the hard way. And this first one definitely was, my mother had passed away in May, and I thought we had done everything right, or we had the trust, the account was set up. But one thing I didn't realize that once the bank was notified that my mother's passing, they froze her bank account. Mm-hmm. I assumed that since it was in a trust that it would be okay, but the trust didn't have its own EIN number. They just used my mom's social security number. So we had to update the cards we had to get an EIN, and then they were to reopen that. But that's just something, if you're going through the loss of a parent, there's so many things that you're trying to deal with. Just maybe one little nugget to make sure that you change that account or close it before the bank freezes it. Another thing I learned, well, we don't talk much about Becky. She's like our right-hand woman, right? She does so much. And I've teased her that we're going to make her come on the podcast, but she just does not like to be on video.
That would be great.
If she was on video, you would realize she has a good set of hair.
She does.
And what I learned, one of the reasons she has a good set of hair is that she goes to the same hairdresser you do.
That's not a hairdresser.
Well, that according to Becky, she said it's her hair is not a hairdresser, it's a hairdresser.
Oh, okay. Oh, gotcha.
But you know who also goes to the same hairdresser?
Who's that?
Becky's mom, Patricia.
Oh.
So I learned that Becky and her mom and Cameron all go to the same beauty salon. At the same time, I don't know if you guys get under the dryer and doing some, talking and all that, all spilling the tea. I don't know, and nor do I want to know, but that's just one thing that I learned. I tell you another thing I learned, and again, this is just to reiterate, we got to cherish the good times. And we've had some good times this year, and at least me, maybe it's the skeptic in me. I'm like, these good times aren't going to last forever. We got to enjoy them, because odds are there's going to be some difficulty. There might be a health or a financial emergency, or who knows. But you know what? While the times are good now, let's make sure that we enjoy them. Another thing I learned in the great state of Hawaii, after a couple Mai Tais of talking after you and your family left, I had a nice little powwow with your mom.
Oh my gosh.
Man,
I can't wait.
Dude, she does like the Mai Tais. And you know what? she thanked me.
Oh yeah, what'd
She goes,
thank you for?
I'm so thankful that you took Cameron under your wing all those 15 years ago, and just how happy she was that he has a good man to look up to. So I just do that as the goodness of my heart, you know, but it's always good to hear a little positive feedback. So Cameron, you're welcome.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing, I guess I
You got more. Wow.
Learned, but I was reminded.
Yeah.
We pay more in taxes than we know. And a lot of times we focus on our income tax. What most people only focus on is the refund or what they owe at the end of the year. But they don't realize how much money they've paid through the year. And I was looking at buying a property, like a vacation home rental in California. No, the property taxes are freaking insane. Not only are you paying a high amount, but those property taxes, even the ones here, I'm paying almost $7,000 a year just in property taxes. And you know what? You pay tax on the money you earn, you pay sales tax on the money that you spend, and then you end up paying additional taxes on assets you own. I guess I'm just venting here. Maybe I need to go back to where I started of the Serenity Prayer, you know, but just like you said, we got to take action. We need to talk with a good CPA, and there are opportunities there to pay less in taxes. So that was just more of a vent than lessons learned, but that just really got me going.
Well, I'm going to send you a video. Maybe I'll put it in the show notes too. Patrick Bet David actually had a great little segment on not income taxes, but tariffs. He did a history on income taxes and compared that with tariffs and the potential for making a pivot. So I thought it was very interesting. I'll put that in the show notes. I'll definitely send it to you. 2 points of clarification. One, I know you're lying about my mom.
No,
she's not a big Mai Tai drinker. And then number 2 is I don't go to a beauty salon. It was a barber shop is where I met my barber. So
that's where you met her, or that's where you go?
That's where I met her, and then she has since moved
to a beauty salon.
But I am loyal. So, anyways, guys, if you're still with us at this point in the show, I applaud you. Thank you guys for sticking around. We appreciate you guys very much. Speaking about being thankful, we're thankful for having this business. We're thankful for having you guys as clients and listeners. And again, we appreciate it. We continue to look to produce value for you guys here in 2025.
Go make it a fantastic year.
Take care.
If you like this video, I know you'll like this one. And if you want to learn how investors use infinite banking to increase their returns and lower their taxes, check this out. And if you have some questions and want to see if infinite banking is for you, hop on a discovery call with us. Link for that will be in the description.